We are going to have another panel session now, and we talked first about knowing your customers. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of knowing your competition, which I think is possibly even more important. So, Anne Ferguson, please join our panel. You know where Anne fits into the scheme of things. Miranda is going to join us. Miranda Lang from Fleurieu Peninsula Tourism. Very important in tourism to know your competition. Sally is going to rejoin us, please. And we're going to have Melanie again, because Melanie's business is, I think, fairly unique in the hills, but it's also got such an interesting focus on research and understanding that we're hoping to draw out from you about knowing your competition, because the world is getting fuller of opportunities, but more opportunities also means more competition. So I wonder if we can start. Who's going to be brave? Miranda, you haven't spoken yet, so I think we'll give Sally a rest, and Melanie will save an Anne. So why don't we introduce Miranda, and talking about how you in your business, which is very focused on competition, get to know your competition and how you deal with that. Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you, Heather. For those of you who do know me, they know you know I do like to speak, and for those of you who are wondering, the accent is Canadian, not American. No offense, but not American. And I do represent the Fleurieu Tourism. When I'm thinking of competition, I'll just kind of play this twofold a little bit. First of all, I believe strongly that knowledge is power. And I think, like most of you in your businesses, it's really advantageous to actually know what other people are doing, know their best practices, know what works for them, what doesn't work for them. So knowing your competition definitely has benefits to your direct business. It's really through observation, being maybe a secret shopper or whatnot. From a tourism perspective, I don't like to use the word as competition. I don't think of Adelaide Hills or Kangaroo Islands as competitive destinations when it comes to traveling with the Fleurieu. I see it all as assets. So it's really taking the strengths of what other businesses or regions have, depending on what your product is, but sorry, just to digress for a second, because I'm not actually selling a product, I'm selling an experience, I can actually leverage off of what the Adelaide Hills does, as well as Kangaroo Island, and increase my own capabilities as promoting a region and the experiences that the region has. So I think when you know what others are doing, whether it's your businesses or destinations in my case, it really lends its support to help me to better plan my businesses, and business planning is really key to ensure that the strategies really identifies and recognize where those opportunities are. It creates opportunities, and then it becomes up to you as the business owner to leverage those opportunities, and that's where I think your innovation needs to play. So that, in a bit of a nutshell, is where I think that the knowledge is very beneficial to you, but it's what you do with it that I think will lead to your success.
And maybe you could just elaborate just a tiny bit more for me and say, how do you work out who your competition is? What would be the steps you would go through when you first arrived into this job, thinking, who are my competitors?
I think if you look at it very black and white, then I could look at if we're targeting towards the domestic market. So again, it's knowing who your audience is, knowing who your customers are, and knowing what they're looking for. So in tourism, if I'm looking at the domestic market, which is really people from Adelaide, and I want to think they've got weekends, they've got a certain amount of money. Do I want them to come to the Fleurieu versus going over to York Peninsula? Yes. So how do I tap into that? So it's kind of identifying, first of all, I guess, who your competing regions are. What it does is that through doing that and knowing kind of what York Peninsula has to offer when it comes to tourism, allows me to take a step back and look at what our discernible differences are or our unique selling point. So it draws you back in to really plan and have a strategic intention and initiatives to focus on your strengths. So when you do know what your competitor is doing, it forces you to look more internally as to how you want to sell and promote your business. So with the York Peninsula, they have a lot of assets. But taking that back to the Florio, it's looking at all the diversity that we have in the Florio. So it allowed us to go in and really reevaluate our own experiences, and then again how we're going to promote it. For example, the Barossa, I don't know if I'm even saying that right now. I'm trying to sound too Australian. The Barossa and McLaren Vale or Langhorne Creek are very unique offerings, and they may seem on the surface that it's all about wine, but each region has its own special quality and their own special unique selling point, and that's what you have to hone in on. And we always, for the McLaren Vale region, their difference is not, they are not the Barossa. They may have a different appeal, but the McLaren Vale region has something that the Barossa doesn't have, and that has very easy access to the coast. So we try to build on the experience of the food and wine, and then bring it to a different level and add in the coastal experiences. So it's creating product and awareness about the variety of things that you can do just kind of based on the surface. So it is really important to know those other destinations and what they're doing, how they're being marketed, how they're being positioned. Eyre Peninsula is being positioned as the seafood frontier. Well, that's okay for the Florio because we're not going to position ourselves as the seafood frontier. But if we were to kind of compete when it comes to seafood, well, they've kind of got that market share, so it would be silly for us to actually try to tap into that. But we can leverage off of the Florio food and all the good works that they're doing.
And it strikes me the old business technique of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats is always a good framework to look at who else is in the marketplace. So who's going to be brave and go next? Anne?
I'd just like to say you must know your competition, but then you've got to know your point of difference, because if you haven't got a point of difference, you've got no selling edge. So I always say to my CEOs, I want them on the other side of the fence to be looking over saying, I want to be doing what they're doing. And I think we've been quite successful here in the Adelaide Hills, Florio and Kangaroo Island, because we've had the edge of getting up there in front. We have the shift that runs, and now we're taking that into the Murray Lands, and I think that will be emulated right throughout. So, and education is another area that RDA has taken the forefront. So yes, it's that point of difference and them saying on the other side of the fence, I want to do what they're doing.
And as our colleague said last night, sometimes your assets are intangible. It's obviously easy when you're thinking about a fabulous view or a fabulous experience or a great wine, but they're also about your attitude to people. Our guests last night said they loved their visit here simply because everyone was so friendly and welcoming. Assets can be very diverse, and they can also be your point of difference. So, Melanie, can you talk to us again, or Sally, I don't mind. Sally's going to talk to us about knowing your competition.
Well, something a little different to think about is I know a lot of businesses are scared of their competition and haven't even met them and had a decent chat with them. So a lot of my competition that's around that, I've actually sat down and had a coffee with them and got to know their business and got to know them personally. And straight away it takes your eyes of being, obviously you're in competition in some way, and it's important exactly what Anne said there, but in some way also not to look at them in a different light either. They're exactly the same person as you, trying to do exactly the same thing, so it's important to build a relationship even with your competitors if you can. I've got a few that even when I go on holidays or I've got lots of work on, I actually refer it to them. So it's important that we build a relationship with also our competitors.
Thank you. Melanie?
I think the fashion industry is one of the most competitive when we have a lot of competition. And now that we are working in a global market, it's even more important for us to know those markets. Each country has its own local following of brands, and that's something we've had to learn. Luckily, the world is interested in Australian brands, so we've got a point of difference there when we're hitting into an international market. I think for us, because it is so competitive and that point of difference is important, and especially because we're finding we've got a house of brands, having the 3 brands, we have to be careful not to compete with ourselves as well as our competition. You know, we're selling into the same demographic, but we don't want to compete for sales. So as a design director, I have to be incredibly all over them to make sure that, you know, even sharing fabrics down to the smallest things, that they'll pick up on, that we're competing against ourselves. So outside of that, we've got, you know, there's lots of other people doing trend brands and price points where we are, and I think our edge is that we are focused on our formula of how we make ourselves different, how many times a year we're dropping, how much product we're dropping, exclusivity in our prints. We buy prints that are exclusive, and other sorts of things that makes us more of a luxury brand, and we try and pitch ourselves up quite high with our marketing. So it comes across as a luxury, whereas we're actually affordable. So that's I think where we've had to go for competing in such a saturated market, and it seems to be working that way. But yeah, it's very competitive, and we have to know, and also knowing other markets and countries. We were talking about that earlier. It's just a lot of research, going to those areas, getting to know them, shopping around, going into stores, talking to the sales teams, making sure that I'm pretty much, I think I'm online from 7 in the morning to at least midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I've always got the web open, and no matter what I'm doing, there's always another page there that I'm scrolling through something, whether it's Facebook, whether it's whatever it is, because it is more than a full-time job just keeping on top of your market. It really is.
I think that's brought out a really good point for us. About knowing your competition means knowing who you are and where you position yourself. And I think we've seen a lot of businesses that have been extremely successful by diversifying and becoming highly specialised, rather than the shotgun approach to business, in which you try and be all things to all people and succeed in actually achieving nothing. So looking at your competition can be very valuable in actually defining your own particular niche and how you can be truer to your brand as you've described it.